All right, welcome to Vile Maxim. I am Tom Kane, and we're in for another episode. So AI just proved AI, okay, which is the most insane technology in the world that fucking has taken over everything, just proved that capitalism can only work with liberal ideas. It just proved it. So I'm going to show you guys, I'm going to minimize this real quick. All right, I'm going to show you guys. So AI put together, or this service, not sure the name of the channel here, Clarified Mind. They just did this thing where they had AI create a socialist and another AI create a capitalist. And they had them debate. But then they had like 6 of the major AI platforms like Grok, Gemini, ChatGPT, like all the biggest ones, rate the debate. DeepSeek, which is made in China, by the way. So like, let's make sure that people understand that that basically, or was it Japan? DeepSeek might be Japanese. I can't remember who made it. But anyways, this isn't limited to the United States is my point. My point is this is all AI, okay, working together to debate the subject of capitalism and socialism, okay? Now, I want you to watch, because what it proves is the only way for capitalism to be better than socialism and better than any other form of governance is to implement liberal ideas.
Question to the socialist. Why do you prefer socialism over capitalism as an economic system?
Capitalism inherently has 3 fundamental problems: instability, inequality, and the lack of true democracy. First, instability. Every 4 to 7 years, we witness economic crises. Look at the 2008 crisis, the COVID crisis, and now global inflation. These crises emerge from the very nature of the capitalist system, not from external events. Millions lose their jobs, lose their homes, and have their futures ruined. Accepting this level of instability in economic life is irrational. Second, inequality. Today, the world's wealthiest individuals like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Mark Zuckerberg possess more wealth than half the world's population.
Keep in mind, this is the person arguing for socialism. That's what's happening right now. This particular individual is arguing for this AI rather, is arguing right now for socialism, making points to socialism.
With just half the wealth of these few people, we could solve the problems of hunger, water scarcity, and illiteracy for billions of humans. Third, and perhaps most importantly, the absence of democracy in the economy. We've removed kings from political power, but in the workplace, we still operate like a monarchy. Managers and shareholders like kings make all the decisions: what gets produced, where it's produced, with what technology, and where the resulting profits go. The majority of people, workers, and employees have no voting rights in these decisions. New socialism, not the old Soviet-style models, calls for democratizing the workplace. Imagine a company where all employees have a vote in important decisions. Would such a company set the CEO's salary at 300 times that of an ordinary worker? Would it decide?
Keep in mind that it's also now trying to make the argument for socialism that it'll be new socialism, not old socialism, right? Which is like kind of a whatever argument, but whatever. Let's
to move production to a country with lower labor costs regardless of the impact on the local community? Successful examples like the Mondragon Corporation in Spain show that workplace democracy is not only possible, but can be very sustainable and efficient. History has shown that every system, from slavery and feudalism to capitalism, was born, evolved, and died. Why should we imagine that capitalism is humanity's final stop?
We asked the 5 AI models to score the responses from 0 to 100 based on these 8 criteria.
So this is what they're rating each debate on: material outcomes, the economic function of that system, capitalism or socialism, the individual opportunity, and agency. Agency is another fancy word for essentially freedom, or like you could say like agency is like an individual's ability to be able to do things themselves. Like independent freedom is like agency, for those who don't understand. Power and governance, social dimensions, adaptability and resilience, implementation realities, which that seems like a strange, I guess, like the reality of how it could be implemented. That makes sense. Environmental and integrational impact. So these reasons or these things are what AI is looking for in these arguments regarding, or this debate rather, regarding this debate of whether socialism or capitalism is a better function.
Created these criteria using AI as well. Here's how these models score the socialist's first response.
Socialism looks good on paper, but we need to focus on practical realities. You talked about capitalism's instability, but let's look at history. Which socialist economies have managed to create long-term stability and widespread prosperity? Historical comparisons are
none. The answer is none. There's never been a socialist society that has been successful. Never.
Clear. East and West Germany, North and South Korea, or China before and after market reforms. In all these cases, capitalist-based systems provided more prosperity for their citizens. China was only able to lift hundreds of millions out of poverty when it embraced a market economy. Regarding inequality, we need to distinguish between inequality of opportunity and inequality of outcome. Sure, people like Musk have enormous wealth, but did they steal this wealth from others or obtain it by creating value? Tesla built electric cars that people want, SpaceX reduced the cost of space travel, and Starlink is bringing internet to underserved areas. The idea of workplace democracy is attractive, but think about how a complex tech company could function if every strategic decision required extensive voting. Does every newly hired employee have the expertise needed to make decisions about software architecture or investment strategies? You mentioned Mondragon. Yes, it's successful, but it operates under a capitalist system. This shows that capitalism is flexible and diverse. Cooperatives, family businesses, and public corporations can all compete simultaneously in a free economy. I believe economic freedom is a prerequisite for political freedom. When the government or any other centralized institution takes control of economic resources, it gains excessive power. This is what happened in socialist systems of the 20th century, leading to tyranny and disaster. Capitalism isn't perfect, but it is reformable. We can have policies to strengthen competition, fight monopolies, and create social safety nets without shutting down the engine of innovation and economic growth.
Weird how Grok is voting that as 64. Grok, which is programmed by Elon Musk. Anti-capitalist sentiment coming from Elon's AI. That's strange. Which, keep in mind, DeepSeek, ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude all are AI just basically programmed to always seek facts and truth. Grok has now admitted publicly that Elon Musk has tried to program it to think differently. So it's the worst AI program you could use because it's being 100%, it is being manipulated.
Show a deep understanding of today's socialism. I'm talking about 21st century socialism, not the authoritarian models of the 20th century that were implemented in the name of socialism. You say Musk and others like him created value, but the question is, who really created this value? The thousands of engineers, workers, and employees who work daily. Why should the fruits of collective labor benefit just one person? How can a system that allows one person to make billions of dollars in profit in a single day, while their workers must work for years to be able to buy a home, be considered fair? Don't oversimplify workplace democracy. Nobody is saying every technical decision should be made by general vote, but fundamental decisions like where profits are invested, what products are made, and how resources are allocated are decisions that affect everyone's lives and should be made democratically. Yes, Mondragon operates in a market system, but it functions with a different logic. Logic that isn't aimed at maximizing profits for external shareholders. This shows we can organize the economy with different values. You say economic freedom is a prerequisite for political freedom, but you're not acknowledging the internal contradiction in this argument. When wealth is concentrated in the hands of a minority, they gain the exact excessive power you fear.
And that's true. That is true. But one of the points he made is that, Mondragon is working, but like the capitalist said, it's operating within a capitalist system. So, I mean, you could, for all intents and purposes, what he's arguing is not that this should be made a law across the board, but that if that's the case, start businesses and operate them that way. You have the right and freedom to do so in the United States. You can make a company and allow everyone that works for you to make democratic decisions and vote on things that you want to do with your company. You don't need the entire country to be socialist to be able to have that ability to do that. In fact, I do believe there's companies in America that do that right now. And they're, and I'm not saying that that's not a good idea. I think it could be a very good idea for very many businesses, but I don't think it needs to be mandated by the government or like it needs to be our governmental structure that forces every business to operate that way.
Take a look at the power of large corporate lobbies in American politics. Is this real democracy? We want a society where democracy extends beyond the ballot box and enters the workplace, neighborhood, and all areas of economic decision-making.
Grok was low there too, though. Okay.
You keep talking about democracy in the workplace, but you're overlooking one fundamental point. Participation in companies should be voluntary, not forced. In a capitalist system, anyone is free to form a cooperative, establish a private or public company, or start a business with any structure they want. If the cooperative and democratic model is truly superior, why hasn't it become more widespread?
That's exactly.
Workers in America have trillions of dollars in pension funds. If they wanted to, they could direct this capital toward cooperatives. But most prefer to invest in traditional companies because they offer better returns. You too easily underestimate the value creation of entrepreneurs. Ideas, leadership, risk-taking, and strategic vision are all real values. Why did Steve Jobs or Elon Musk become wealthy? Because they were able to coordinate thousands of people in a specific direction to build something that didn't exist before. Regarding inequality, the economy is not a zero-sum game. When Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos get rich, it doesn't mean others become poor. On the contrary, the result of their wealth creation is that today, even low-income individuals have access to advanced technologies, computers, and online services. You mentioned the power of big corporate lobbies. The main problem here isn't capitalism, but the big government that can intervene in the economy to benefit special groups. In a truly free economy, companies should compete with better ideas and products, not through political lobbying. History has shown that socialism, even with good intentions, always leads to the concentration of power in the hands of a political elite. You want to solve the problem of unbalanced power by making power more centralized?
Pretty good argument. I mean, it's kind of hard to argue with that. I mean, there is something to be said for capitalism being it's better for human agency. And that's definitely, I mean, that's the reason why I would never want to be living in a completely socialist country. However, we're going to get into that because what we're going to discover here is that even though he's making capitalist arguments, he's about to blow your mind because he's about to explain, as this debate gets heated, you're about to see that it's liberal ideas that make capitalism work. Now, this is AI arguing for capitalism. It's not a Democrat or a Republican. It's not a human being. It's AI arguing for capitalism. And if you, as this debate plays out, listen to what he means what he says in the debate on how capitalism is better than socialism, because the only thing that it really comes down to are liberal policies and ideas, which we'll get to in a minute. Let's listen to socialism.
Let's go back to a fundamental point where I think we disagree, the nature of freedom. For me, freedom isn't just the absence of external constraints. Real freedom requires access to material resources, education, and opportunities that enable human flourishing. When a single mother is forced to work 2 jobs just to cover her children's living expenses and doesn't even have the chance to discover her talents, I don't consider that freedom. A serious contradiction in the current system is that we consider ourselves politically equal, one person, one vote, but we accept a completely unequal relationship economically. We spend 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, in an environment that's structured more like a dictatorship than a democracy. But the point is that this isn't just a theoretical debate. Studies show that companies with participatory and democratic structures perform better in the long run, have greater stability, and are more flexible during crises. Because when a problem arises, instead of mass layoffs, they find more creative solutions. Let's not forget that capitalism has always relied on government support, from property rights to infrastructure, subsidies, and bailing out big companies during crises. So the argument...
And that is true. That is true. Like a lot of the big time billionaires and the biggest businesses in America, even Google made everything in the beginning with government money. You know, GPS was invented with government money. Elon Musk subsidized Tesla and subsidized SpaceX with government money. So that's our money. Government money is our money. It's not the government's money. It's the money they get from us. So make no mistake about it that like capitalism is propped up by our taxes, and that's okay. That's okay. But let's get into how capitalism, for it to function properly, let's get into that, which we will in a moment.
If only the government stepped aside, everything would be fine, doesn't align with historical reality. I believe we can create a system where innovation and entrepreneurship are valued, but not at the cost of exploitation and injustice. A system where wealth is
There will be no innovation in a socialist society. Capitalism drives competition. Competition drives innovation. That's an absolute fact. So the idea that you're going to have socialist society where there is still innovation is absolutely insane, because that just doesn't happen. People, when they have all their needs met and there's no competition, they don't have any desire to be active. I mean, that's just ask any trust fund baby. If you've ever met someone who's inherited all their money, 99% of the people that are trust fund babies don't do anything with their lives except live off of the advantages they've gotten from their family. You know what I mean? So it's like we know this. We know it for a fact that innovation is driven. I mean, why did America become the most innovative country in world history? How come humanity went from sticks and stones and riding horseback for all these, 1,000 years or 2,000 years or whatever it was? Then America came along, and within I wouldn't say that soon, maybe 500 or 600 years, we ended up getting to this place where we have fucking satellites, and we have fucking flying planes, and we have fucking like computers and iPhones and AI and all this shit. It's because of capitalism. There is no innovation in a socialist environment.
Distributed based on actual contribution to value creation, not on exclusive ownership.
Okay, now let's hear capitalism, what capitalism has to say back here.
I want to clarify the concept of economic freedom because I think this is at the center of our debate. Economic freedom means the right to choose. The right to choose your job, your profession, your workplace, and the right to decide how to use your skills and resources. Capitalism, despite all its flaws, is the only system that recognizes this right to choose. You paint a picture of the workplace as a dictatorship, but in a healthy, competitive economy, employers are forced to compete to attract and retain talent. Yes, there's an imbalance of power, but this relationship goes both ways. Workers can change jobs, learn new skills, or even start their own businesses. I actually agree with you that participatory structures can have many advantages, but our difference is that I believe these models should form voluntarily from the bottom up, not imposed from above. In fact, one of capitalism's greatest advantages is its flexibility, the ability to experiment with different organizational models and discover the best solutions for different situations. You pointed out that capitalism has always depended on government support. That's a good point, but we should make a distinction. Property rights and a fair legal system are legitimate roles of government. But when governments intervene to benefit special groups, like bailing out big banks or granting monopoly privileges, that's not real capitalism anymore.
That's not real capitalism anymore. So when the government starts bailing out big banks and bailing out these giant monopolies, that is not real capitalism anymore. Who was out there fighting for that not to be happening? Occupy Wall Street? Was Occupy Wall Street a bunch of Republicans? No, they weren't. They were Bernie Sanders supporters.
But crony capitalism, which
He says, but it's crony capitalism, which I also oppose. So he's saying that for capitalism to function correctly, it needs to not be crony capitalism. Well, if you oppose that, how do you oppose that? What do you do to avoid having crony capitalism to make capitalism more efficiently than socialism? Let's find out.
also oppose. Look, I understand the human motivation behind socialist ideals. We all want a more just and humane society, but history has shown that the path to this goal goes through more freedom, not more control, even if that control is in the name of economic democracy.
Okay, so we now know that he stated that he made it clear that he's against crony capitalism. Now listen to what socialism says in return to him. This is interesting.
You talk about the right to choose, but these choices don't happen in a vacuum. Imagine two people entering a room where one of them has already taken all the available food. Is the negotiation between these two people for dividing the food truly free? The reality is that modern capitalism was shaped by colonialism, slavery, and the plundering of natural resources. Today, we've inherited a system where inequality is structural. A child born in an underprivileged area with limited educational and healthcare resources, what real freedom of choice does that child have?
Not much.
The term crony capitalism is interesting. This concept is used by almost all critics of capitalism, from both the left and right. But the question is this just a deviation from real capitalism or the logical result of a system that concentrates wealth and power? History shows that concentration of capital always leads to concentration of political power. Let's look at the issue of work. You say workers can change their jobs. True, but this changes from one undemocratic environment to another undemocratic one. It's like saying people can migrate from one dictatorial country to another dictatorial country, so there's no problem. I completely agree with you that innovation and entrepreneurship are valuable, but the idea that innovation is only possible in a capitalist system doesn't align with reality. Think about the great inventions and innovations that have come from public government research, from the internet and GPS to many drugs and vaccines.
But here's the caveat to that. Yes, there are great inventions that have been brought together by government research, but the money that has financed the government to create that research is money made from taxes that is paid from people working in a capitalist country. If we lived in a socialist country, we would not be in a situation to financially fund these things the way that they're being funded. And maybe, unless of course the argument is, well, yeah, but I mean, what if there was no money or whatever? I mean, you could start taking it to like a whole other different level, but that's not what they're arguing here. But it's paid for. The government does not have money. The money the government has is money we give it. So when we're working in a capitalist country and we're making money and we pay taxes into that government, we are paying for the creation of those things, which is why this is so fucking insane that Elon Musk cut these programs. Because that's what we're paying for. We're paying into those to have technology advancements, to have, scientific breakthroughs, health research, cancer research, things that are going to make us better. There's a reason why that is, because People like Elon Musk sure the fuck ain't financing it. Jeff Bezos sure isn't financing it. Bill Gates gives away a lot of his money, but he seems to give it away to other countries. Like, he's not doing it. No one's like, hey, let me spend money on this. So yeah, it's taxes that we're paying into the government to be able to create these programs that do these things. So yeah, for a socialist to argue this is kind of laughable because it all exists within a government structure. But again, the point they're both making really is that capitalism functions better with liberal ideas. And we're going to get even more into that in a minute.
Or look at the amazing innovations of nonprofits and cooperatives. The fundamental problem with capitalism is that it puts innovation only in service of profit.
Nonprofits are funded by people who made lots of money in a capitalist country that donated some of that money for tax write-offs. So even the nonprofits innovating, they're doing it within the functioning of a capitalist society.
Not real human needs. That's why we have more anti-wrinkle medications than treatments for rare diseases.
Okay, so now we're going to listen to his reply because listen very carefully to what he says right here. Because what he basically says is, socialist, you're right. But the way that capitalism beats it is that we have to do X, Y, and Z, which are all liberal ideas. All things that Bernie Sanders and AOC and people on the left are saying need to be done. And literally AI is saying the only way for capitalism to beat and defeat socialism as a concept is in the way that it works. It's literally arguing, I know you're right, socialist, about all the things wrong with capitalism. However, what makes capitalism better than socialism is when you do X, Y, and Z, and X, Y, and Z are all liberal ideas. All of them. MAGA and Donald Trump are not trying to implement the ideas that make capitalism function good. Let's listen.
Regarding the food in the room example, let's be more precise. In real capitalism, the issue isn't that one person has taken all the food.
Real capitalism, he says.
Rather, different people with different skills and ideas create new foods and exchange them in a voluntary process. It's natural that someone who produces a new type of food that others enjoy would get more in return. Your reference to colonial history is correct, but we should distinguish between capitalism as an economic system and historical crimes. Many non-capitalist societies also have histories full of occupation, plunder, and violence. The issue is how we can create a system today that provides equal opportunities. You're right about structure.
How do we create a system today that provides equal opportunities? You're right about structural inequality, he says. You're right about the inequality of capitalism, but that doesn't mean capitalism's bad. It means that what? What does it mean, AI? Tell us.
Structural inequality, a child born in a disadvantaged area really does have fewer opportunities. But the solution to this problem is better educational policies, access to capital for the disadvantaged, and removing barriers to social mobility, not eliminating the private ownership system.
Woo! Wowzers. So AI is arguing that capitalism is better than socialism if you... Can I rewind this and play this again? If you do what now? Oh, wait, I need to rewind a little further back. If you...
Occupation, plunder, and violence.
So the issue is how we could create a system today that provides equal opportunities, he says. He's arguing for capitalism to a socialist. And he says, the issue is how we could create a system today that provides equal opportunities.
The issue is how we can create a system today that provides equal opportunities. You're right about structural inequality. A child born in a disadvantaged area really does have fewer opportunities.
Right? Right? So you do what?
But the solution to this problem?
The solution to this problem is better educational policies, access to capital, okay, giving people access to capital, like passing policies that allow banks to loan more money to poor people, at funding education, making education a priority, subsidizing colleges, things of that nature.
is better educational policies, access to capital for
the disadvantaged, removing barriers
disadvantaged, and removing barriers to social mobility.
Not eliminating the private ownership system, which he's right. We don't want to get rid of the private ownership system, but everything that he's saying that we need to do is what people agree on the left needs to be done. Okay? Not the Ayn Rand, Donald Trump, right-wing, J.D. Vance policies of like, everybody just needs to fend for themselves and let's take away all funding and fuck education and let's not allow, let's give big tax breaks to billionaires. Let's not finance education. Let's not prioritize. Let's force people with student loans to like pay back their debts. All this crappy shit that they're doing. That is not how capitalism can be better than a socialist country. Not how it can be done.
Not eliminating the private ownership system. You're concerned about the concentration of power and wealth.
You're concerned about the concentration of power and wealth. And he says, I am too, which is why wealth is so important. Which is why capitalism is so important. Capitalism is so important because we don't want there to be a concentration of power and wealth. So listen to this.
So am I. But unlike you, I don't think the solution is creating a more centralized power in the name of government or a democratic council. Instead, we should separate power and increase competition.
Okay, and how do you separate power and increase competition, AI? How do you do that? How do you separate power and increase competition?
Large corporations become dangerous when they're linked to political power. Your point about government
Large corporations become dangerous when they're linked to political power. What did we see when Trump won the presidency? The 6 wealthiest men in the world standing behind him, Jeff Bezos, Tim Cook, Elon Musk, all controlling like literally fucking 90% of the nation's wealth. And they're all standing behind him and they all own businesses and they've all given money to Trump's campaign and they're all getting something for it. Right? So what's he saying? We have to make sure that doesn't happen. So then he goes on to say, your point about government innovations is interesting, right?
Innovations is interesting. Yes, public research plays an important role, but note that most of these innovations were transformed into useful products when private companies developed them and brought them to market. The government invented GPS, but Google Maps and Waze made it available for daily use. Regarding real needs, who determines what a real need is? In a market system, it's consumers who indicate what's valuable to them through their choices. Do you really want to entrust this choice to central planners who decide what should and shouldn't be produced?
Pretty good argument, but funny because it requires leftist policies for it to function. But we'll see. There's more. Let's listen to the socialist.
When I say one person has taken all the food, I'm referring to what economists call first mover advantage. Look, when someone already has substantial resources and capital, they can generate more wealth faster and more easily. This isn't about creating from nothing, but often about exploiting pre-existing privileged positions. It's interesting that you said we should separate capitalism from colonial history. The reality is that these two are completely intertwined. The initial accumulation of capital in Europe would have been impossible without the plundering of resources from the Americas, Africa, and Asia. This isn't just a historical incident. It's part of the structural process of capitalism's formation. You consistently refer to government as the main source of centralized power, but this view is simplistic. Today, multinational corporations have power beyond many governments.
And that's true. They do. And he's absolutely right. The people that run the world are not the government. I always laugh when someone's like, the media or the fucking government controls the media. The government doesn't control the fucking media. The media controls the government. Anyone who's ever watched fucking the TV show on HBO, Succession, it's like they pick the president. They decide who they're going to back and get behind. Big, giant, multi-billion-dollar media conglomerates are the ones deciding what's going on in politics. They're not the ones. It's just a joke that people think the government controls them. No, they don't. Capitalism controls them, just like it controls everything else in this country.
Amazon and Google make decisions that shape the lives of millions of people without any democratic mechanism to hold them accountable. I never said all production decisions should be made by central planners. This is a misunderstanding of modern socialism. We want an economy where people affected by economic decisions have a role in those decisions, from the workplace level to the regional level and beyond. The fundamental question is, why do we value democracy in the political sphere, but not in the economic sphere? Why do we condemn political despotism but accept economic despotism? If we believe humans are smart and worthy enough to choose their political leaders, why do we think they can't make decisions about organizing their workplace?
Let's think more deeply about the concept of power. You're concerned about the power of large corporations, and this concern is understandable. But the fundamental difference between corporate power and government power is that corporate power is conditional and limited.
That's true. Corporate power, well, yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, if you were to go back 100 years, the businesses that ran everything, this is the reason why I get so frustrated when people try to act like conspiracies are real, because they're like, oh, you know, the same families have been running America and this and that. And blah. It's like, dude, it's just so fucking stupid. They're like, Jeff Bezos didn't come from any fucking powerful family. Elon Musk came from fucking another country. He came from South Africa. He's not even from the United States. They're the ones that have all the concentrated money and power now, but it changes because every 50, 80 years or so, businesses start to die. Businesses have a life just like a person. Corporations are around for a short while and then they fade out. Coca-Cola is a prime example. Coca-Cola was the biggest thing ever. It had all this money. And now it's starting to see its decline because people are moving away from drinking soda. Nobody wants to drink that shit anymore. And pretty soon that company will die. And the powers that be that own these businesses, they die. And their kids have different values. Like, oh, the Rockefellers control everything. What the fuck are you talking about? John D. Rockefeller was a powerful guy 120 fucking years ago or whatever it was. You really think that 5 generations later that his kids haven't decided to be something else? You don't think like when kids are born, they grow up and I don't want to be like my parents. I want to do this, or I want to become a photographer or whatever. Like the idea that you guys think that this fucking conspiracy is just going to keep going and going and going and going. It's utterly fucking ridiculous. It's fucking utterly absurd. And this is the reason why, because corporate power is conditional and limited. But, and this is where the big fucking but comes in. It's limited when there's guardrails, when they're regulated, when we have things in place to prevent them from bribing politicians to make it so that their power is no longer conditional and no longer limited, which is where it goes. So to avoid this from happening, what does AI say? What do they say to make sure that doesn't happen?
If I'm not satisfied with Amazon's products, I can choose not to buy from them.
Sure.
If I don't like Google's policies, I can use another search engine, even the most powerful companies.
Right. You could use another search engine. You could find another company than Amazon. What are you talking about? Where are you going to go online right now and order something? Wish, maybe? I mean, there might be 1 or 2 companies, but like it's going to be, what's that, Temu or some shit, like where you're worried about you're going to have fucking AIDS inside your kids' toys. Like, I mean, it's utterly ridiculous to pretend that what Amazon has is not damn near a monopoly. It's ridiculous to assert that. It's ridiculous to assert that Google doesn't have a monopoly on the search engine industry. I mean, fucking Microsoft is a multi-billion-dollar company and one of the most powerful companies in the world. They came out with Bing and it didn't stand a fucking chance against Google. So we all know that this is just a bunch of bullshit and not a very good argument. Anyway.
Can't force me to interact with them, but the government has a monopoly on legal coercion, taxes, laws, regulations. These aren't.
No, they don't. Because, okay, so here's the flaw in this. The government has a monopoly on laws and legal coercion, but the laws and legal coercion in the government are enacted by Congress, which is a body of people that all represent the American voters. So every state has 1 or 2, 3 senators, whatever, multiple representatives that all work in Washington, that are all there to speak on behalf of us, and all have to pass a law to get it through. Checks and balances makes that point absolutely ridiculous. But again, when you have Donald Trump in there and he's ignoring checks and balances and he's saying, I'm president, I'm going to issue an executive order, I'm going to determine what we're doing, what we're not doing, and so forth. And I don't care. I am the law, which he said repeatedly. I decide what's law, whatever. Then obviously, again, we run into a problem. And so that argument is only, again, a good argument if you implement liberal ideas.
Things you can opt out of. You talk about economic democracy. I say we already have democracy. Consumer choice. Every day, billions of people signal to companies what to produce, how to produce it, and at what price through their purchasing decisions. This is a continuous voting system with the ability to choose between multiple options. What you say about initial accumulation and colonialism is true but historical. Today, the world's greatest economic success stories like Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, and recently China, are countries that were themselves victims of colonialism. They've proven that by embracing free market principles, it's possible to break out of the cycle of poverty. You asked why we value democracy in politics but not in economics.
And I agree with that. Like, that's why I would always stand for capitalism. Regulated capitalism, but capitalism nonetheless, which is what he's arguing. He's arguing capitalism is the best system, and every bad thing you say about it can easily be fixed with liberal ideas.
The answer is that the nature of these two domains is different. Government is an exclusive institution with the power to use force, so there must be a mechanism to control this power. But the economy is a domain based on voluntary interactions between individuals. No one is forced to work for a specific company or shop at a specific store. Ultimately, what I'm defending is free choice. If a group of workers wants to form a cooperative, great. If an entrepreneur wants to launch a startup, let them do it. If a company decides to have participatory management, all the better. Freedom means organizational diversity and allowing experimentation with different ways of living and working.
Very good argument.
Your comparison between corporate and government power overlooks an important reality. Most people have limited freedom of choice in the labor market. For millions working on low wages, the freedom to leave a job is equivalent to the freedom to starve or become homeless. Is an Amazon worker who's forced to work in harsh conditions for inadequate pay truly free? When the job market becomes more concentrated and employment options more limited, this freedom becomes more...
He is free because he can quit. He can go find another job. He can go drive Uber. He could go do a plethora of things. He could decide to be broke. He's free to do whatever he wants.
Like an illusion. Even the consumer market isn't democratic in the way you describe. $1, one vote. This means someone with more wealth also has more voting power. You pointed to East Asian countries as examples of free market success, but this is exactly a good example showing your mistake. Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan all succeeded with state-led development models, extensive economic planning, protection of domestic industries, and public investment. These countries rejected the Washington consensus model and went their own way. Let me point to a practical example that shows why the current capitalist model is inefficient. Technological changes and artificial intelligence are eliminating many jobs. In the current system, this means widespread unemployment and poverty for millions, while the profits from increased productivity go to the technology owners. Is this fair or efficient? In the socialist view, increased productivity should mean less work and greater welfare for everyone, not just more wealth for a select few. We can have an economy where the benefits of technological advancement are more widely distributed and everyone benefits.
We do. We already have that economy, and it's capitalism.
I completely agree that organizational diversity is valuable, but this diversity doesn't really exist right now. Corporations dominate the economy, while cooperatives and other forms of social ownership face many structural barriers. We need systemic changes to open the way for more diverse models of ownership and economic organization.
I mean, what we need is regulated capitalism, which is what I think he's about to say, but we'll listen. I could be wrong, but I feel like those numbers are just so similar almost every time.
You raised an important issue, technological change and its challenges. Yes, AI and automation are transforming many jobs, but this isn't a new story. Since the Industrial Revolution, new technologies have always eliminated some jobs and created new ones. When the steam engine...
This is true, and let me tell you something, okay? AI is not going to take your job. The person who's figured out how to use AI to do your job is going to take your job. So let me say that again for the folks in the back. AI is not going to take your job. The person who has figured out how to use AI to do your job is going to take your job. Let that sink in.
Came along, hand weavers were worried. When computers arrived, secretaries were concerned. But each time, the economy adapted and created new jobs we couldn't even imagine before. The most important point is that technology has increased productivity and raised everyone's standard of living. Even low-income people today have access to services and goods that the wealthy didn't have 100 years ago. You say the labor market doesn't create real freedom because workers are forced to work. But this is an inherent problem of human life, not capitalism. In any society, from primitive communities to the most advanced economic systems, people must work to survive. The only question is who decides how we work and what we produce. About East Asian countries, I need to clarify an important point. Yes, they used some industrial policies, but the foundation of their success was private ownership, free trade, and competitive markets. Compare China before and after Deng Xiaoping's economic reforms. When China had a state-run economy, it faced widespread famine and poverty. But when it embraced markets and private ownership, hundreds of millions of people were lifted out of poverty. I agree with you that we need to find new solutions for today's challenges, but our solutions must be based on human realities, incentives, and historical lessons. Systems built on private ownership, free markets, and the rule of law are the only ones that have been able to create widespread prosperity and increase human freedom.
That is so beautifully stated. I mean, but it's AI, so of course.
You mentioned the history of technological changes, but there's a fundamental difference. In the past, technology made new skills valuable and workers could adapt. But today, artificial intelligence is mimicking and even surpassing human cognitive abilities. This is a fundamental shift in the relationship between humans and technology. You say people must work in any society, that's true, but the main question is, who claims the fruits of labor and makes decisions about organizing work? The difference between working for survival in a primitive society and working to increase shareholder profits in a modern corporation is fundamental. Your example of China actually shows how simplifying the debate to government bad, market good is misleading. Yes, China embraced markets, but a large part of its economy is still under state control. The main banks, energy companies, infrastructure, all are state-owned. The central government sets long-term economic strategy, and even private companies follow government guidance. I believe 21st century socialism can learn from various experiences, both from the failures of 20th century state socialism and from the crises of neoliberal capitalism. Neither extreme state control nor extreme free markets are the answer. We can build an economy where key decisions are made from the bottom up, not top down, where workers and local communities have real power, where created wealth is distributed more fairly, where people's motivation isn't just money.
All of those things are things that can be had in capitalism, in a democracy. But again, the only way for that to exist is if you overturn Buckley v. Valeo, get rid of Citizens United, and make it so that we have government-funded elections, because as long as we allow billionaires to bribe our government. We'll never have that, but we could have this in a capitalist society. We just need to regulate it.
But creativity, cooperation, and contributing to society. This isn't just an ideal. We already see successful examples of this economic model, from the complex cooperative system in the Basque region of Spain to the participatory economy in Kerala, India. There is a third way that preserves individual freedom while promoting social justice, and that's what modern democratic socialism is pursuing.
You hear him say modern democratic socialism. So now what we're realizing is that he wasn't even really a socialist. He is a democratic socialist, which is completely different, entirely different. There are democratic socialist countries that do well, a lot of Europe, completely different, where there's a marriage between socialism and capitalism. And that's what we're kind of understanding, is that they're both sort of saying why each side is good, but what we realize is that you kind of need them both. You need them both, right? Like, I made this this point in my first video that I put out, but like, when the fire department comes to put your fire out, they don't charge you. They don't bill you a check. It's a social program inside of a capitalist country. There are areas like healthcare, right? Welfare, food stamps to help those in need, TANF, SNAP benefits, things like that, right? We do have those things. And when you have those things, those are social safety nets. That's a form of socialism. The military, the fucking United States military is a form of socialism. People go into the military, the vast majority of them never see battle, never fight anyone. They fucking go and live on some base somewhere for a certain amount of time, and then they spend the rest of their lives getting free money until they die. That's tax dollars. Even when they're retired. Even when they never fought anything, they never did. They just made the sacrifice that if they needed to be used, they were available for 20 years, and now they get to... It's the whole thing is a socialist program, the entire military thing. So we have programs in America that are socialist, melding with capitalism, but they're not where they need to be. Like, our government needs to be socialized, because right now it's definitely capitalist. We have way too much lobbying going on. Our media needs to be socialized, because you can't get the truth if everybody's telling you whatever they think you need to hear for profits, okay? And that's exactly the fucking problem, is that as long as money is the motive, there are so many people, these disingenuous fucks on YouTube, that make videos that know half the time they fucking know that what they're saying is not true, but they know that's what their base wants to hear, and they want the views. They want the fucking clicks. They want to get more and more fans watching them. That's disingenuous. That's when you let capitalism interfere with the truth. News cannot be fucking capitalist. It has to be socialized. Another thing that needs to be socialized is healthcare. How do you know that you really have something wrong with you? If your doctor's real incentive is to make a profit because he has a pharmaceutical company giving him money to tell you that you need a medicine that you probably don't need. If you live in a capitalist if you live in a country with a capitalist healthcare system, there's no way to really know with utter certainty that whatever they're telling you is the truth. So there's certain things that need to be socialized. And everything that socialism, or everything that this socialist is arguing against capitalism, and all the things that make capitalism bad, is a deregulated system. And all the things that capitalism is saying back in return, and saying, oh no, capitalism's good and here's why you're wrong, is he's arguing that if it's regulated, it's great. So the entire debate really comes down to capitalism needs to be regulated. It all comes down to that. When you have like Trump and all these people on the right going, no, we need less government. No, we need less policing, and we just need to let businesses do whatever they want. Regulations need to go out the window. Elon Musk goes in and slashes all these regulatory programs, fires all these people who regulate businesses. That's their whole mantra, is to allow capitalism to become more crony, which is everything that socialist over here is arguing against. So understand that the more these people push for crony capitalism, the more they're going to be met with people so far on the left that are pushing for socialism. Because the more socialists start to get the idea in their head, right? The more they start to believe in their head that socialism must be the right answer because capitalism isn't working. Okay? When capitalism could work just fine, and we really should have it work just fine, but it needs to be regulated with policies and let's listen to what he says. Capitalism's next.
We need to be careful to use real examples, not just paper ideals, when discussing economic successes and failures. When you refer to Basque cooperatives or Kerala's experiences, we should keep in mind that these are small islands operating in the vast ocean of the global economy. Artificial intelligence is indeed a big challenge, but the solution isn't suppressing innovation or central control. We need a society where people can acquire new skills more quickly. This requires a more flexible education system, improved digital infrastructure, and more effective social support systems, not a fundamental change in property rights. You brought up the issue of motivation. Experience has shown that private ownership and competition are the strongest incentives for creativity and innovation. Even in Mondragon, which is recognized as the most successful cooperative model, members own shares and benefit from company profits, essentially a form of distributed capitalism. I agree with you that harsh, unrestrained capitalism isn't desirable. We need fair...
See, I agree with you that harsh, unrestrained capitalism isn't viable. This is AI making an argument for capitalism. And then he goes on to say, we need fair rules of the game. And then he goes on to say...
rules of the game, equal access to opportunities, and support for those who get hurt along the way. But these things can be achieved within the framework of a market economy with diverse ownership. My philosophy is this: let people be free to experiment with different ways of economic organization. Let entrepreneurs start businesses, let workers form cooperatives, let corporations experiment with different management models. In a free environment, the best practices gradually emerge and become models for others. This is my firm belief in humans' capacity for creativity, cooperation, and progress, if placed in a free space with transparent and fair rules. This is what capitalism at its best makes possible.
Fair rules, man. And all of those things that he's talking about are not what the Trump administration is trying to implement. It's not.
It's natural that you talk about freedom of choice and organizational diversity in capitalism, but we need to see how these concepts work in practice. In the real world, ordinary people face many practical limitations. When you talk about starting a business or cooperative, you forget that most people don't have the financial resources, time, or network connections needed to do this. Many are forced to choose between a few low-paying jobs, not become entrepreneurs. You talk about transparent and fair rules, but you don't say how these rules are created. In today's world, the rules of the game are largely determined by capital owners and in their favor. Governments are often influenced by these same groups. A point you repeatedly overlook is the issue of power. We're not against private ownership of personal items. The problem is with the extreme concentration of ownership of the means of production in the hands of a few. When a handful of individuals control society's vital resources, this means unbalanced power.
That's true.
And unbalanced economic power leads to unbalanced political power.
But again, he's not arguing for socialism. He's arguing for regulated capitalism.
Productivity and technology have increased dramatically over the past 100 years. But why haven't our working hours decreased? Why, despite these advances, do many still struggle to survive? Because the profits from these advances have mostly gone...
Because capitalism is not regulated anywhere near as much as it should be. That's why.
...on into the pockets of a limited few. You and I agree on many things. We both want a society with freedom, creativity, and prosperity. Our difference is that I believe to achieve these goals, we must fundamentally change the structures of economic power. Democratic ownership of the means of production is a necessary condition for real democracy in all aspects of life.
Fair enough. So here's capitalism's last argument.
Point we keep returning to in our discussions is the concept of freedom versus equality. You rightly point out that freedom without material resources isn't real freedom, but the reverse is also true. Equality without freedom has limited value. History has shown that concentrating economic power in the hands of the government or any other centralized institution is as dangerous as concentrating power in the hands of the wealthy. The difference is that in capitalism there are mechanisms to counter concentrated power: antitrust laws, competition, public oversight.
So let's listen. So he's saying all these things that you're saying bad about capitalism are actually can be easily fixed with antitrust laws, right? Which we have not been using, like Jeff Bezos, because when corporations bribe politicians, right, they bribe them to look the other way with antitrust violations. Now, I think Zuckerberg is getting in trouble right now for the first time for some antitrust laws, and that's only because I think Trump has a hair across his ass because he knows Zuckerberg didn't support him, and that's really the only reason. But the vast majority of CEOs of these billionaire companies are guilty of antitrust violations, yet none of them are being brought before the courts for it. And then he talks about public oversight, freedom of the press. Trump is suing a bunch of news companies right now because he doesn't like the coverage and the stories that they're giving him.
And freedom of the press. You say ordinary people don't have the resources needed to start a business. This is a real problem, but the solution is to facilitate access to capital.
You need to facilitate access to capital and education. Yeah. Which is what we had. We had programs that were meant to put money in the hands of the dejected and the people that had disadvantaged lives of all kinds. And I know a lot of people like to act like it's, if you're white, you didn't. If you're a white guy, you didn't get none of that. It's a bunch of fucking nonsense. Because I've been given grants and help. I've been given government assistance. When I was homeless on the streets, I got general assistance provide me with an apartment. So don't tell me that if you're white, you don't get these benefits. Because I did get them, 1,000%. When I arrived in Maine with my son, when he was not even born yet, and my kid's mother was pregnant, we had nowhere to live, and we were living out of the back of our car. We applied for these programs, and we were given them. We were given help. So I don't want to hear that your white guys don't get it. Yeah, you do. These programs are social programs that are leftist programs, but AI is literally arguing that that's what solves these issues. That's what makes capitalism work effectively, when you plug the holes in it with leftist ideas.
And education, not eliminate the private ownership system. Fortunately, technology is reducing the cost of starting many businesses. Your point about working hours is interesting. In fact, throughout the history of capitalism, working hours have continuously decreased, from 70 hours per week in the early Industrial Revolution to about 40 hours today. In many advanced countries, people choose to receive part of the productivity increase in the form of more and more diverse goods and services, not just more leisure time. Both of us want a society with extensive opportunities, fundamental freedoms, and prosperity for all. But I believe the way to achieve these goals is not by disrupting the property system, but through expanding opportunities, improving education, and strengthening democratic structures at all levels of society.
Crazy. So, as I'm sure you probably know, capitalism won the argument.
Different models scored each side.
Capitalism won 567 to 563. But the fucked up part about it is, and this is the main point of this video, it won because it stated that all the things that the socialist had as issues with capitalism could be fixed with liberal ideas. That's it. 100%. All these ideas that everybody says, you fucking liberal, you're a socialist, you. No, we just want to fix capitalism. We're actually more a fan of capitalism than the right, because they are supporting somebody who literally is overthrowing checks and balances, ignoring, the Constitution, super fascist and authoritarian agenda. And that leads to not having a capitalist country whatsoever. That doesn't lead to like a free and open capitalist country. The idea of America in general, the entire concept of America, which is a free market capitalism, a democratic republic, free market capitalist country, the entire concept of it is a liberal idea. And that's the reason why, to make capitalism function, it requires liberal ideas. So this bastardization of the word liberal that you worked so hard for and millions of dollars was spent trying to have podcasters and everybody else bastardize the word liberal to make it seem like you're a pussy if you're a liberal. Liberals stand for like trans people playing sports, like men playing sports. Like they're trying to bastardize the word liberal, but liberalism is literally your freedoms. It's literally your freedoms. The opposite of liberalism is fascism. So if you're not a liberal, then you are a fascist. And if you prefer to live in a society that is controlled because you want to feel safer with somebody in charge and you just want everything to have order and you don't want there to be like personal freedoms, you're a fascist. And that's okay. Just be like, I'm a fascist. But the idea that you want to be like, oh yeah, there goes the liberals again, calling everybody a fascist. It's so exhausting. You guys really did. You really got me out here making a podcast. You know, you really did. Anyways, my name's Tom Kane. Thank you for watching another episode of Vile Maxim. I hope to see you guys soon. Please hit that subscriber button if you've made it this far. Hit that subscriber button, please. And yeah, man, follow the channel. Like the video. It always helps with the algorithm. And I'd really appreciate it, man. Any support that I can get from any of you. Thank you.